Hello again. It is no secret that many people living in Britain have no right at all to be here. Some have entered the country in an irregular fashion by crossing the English Channel in small boats and not presenting their passports upon arrival. Others have come here as students or tourists and simply remained, living and working illegally in this country. Nobody knows just how many illegal immigrants we are talking about, but there can be little doubt that the total number runs into millions. Most people would like to see them removed and sent back to their own countries. This would be a simple enough task, although the logistics involved would make it a pretty large scale operation. We have, after all, done this kind of thing twice in the past, most notably during the First World War, when tens of thousands of German and Austrian citizens were arrested and held in concentration camps until they could be deported from this country. The arrest of foreign citizens in this way was authorised by the Defence of the Realm Act, which was passed in 1914. There was no pussyfooting about, and the camps where these people were held had signs at the gates announcing what they were. At the outbreak of war in 1914, an old factory stood derelict in East London. William Ritchie and Sons had run a jute factory in Carpenter's Road in Stratford, not far from where the Olympic Stadium now stands. There was a fairly substantial community of Germans in East London at this time. They tended to be shopkeepers, and there were so many of them in Stratford that it was known sometimes as Little Germany. Those who are familiar with the area will know that there are a few public houses which reference the German connection in Stratford. The Stratford concentration camp, for such was its official title, had a pretty bad reputation among those interned during the First World War. Surrounded with barbed wire and with mounted machine guns pointing down at the prisoners, it was a grim place to spend the 3 years that it was in existence. Another concentration camp was established at Alexandra Palace in North London. The ultimate object of the exercise of these camps was to concentrate all the foreigners in one place and then remove them from the country for good, which is an aim with which many people today might perhaps feel some sympathy. Those who were obviously too old to be of any use in the German army were taken from the concentration camps regularly, shipped across the Channel, and dumped penniless in Holland. It was an effective way of reducing the population of foreigners resident in Britain. In the 1911 census, 31,254 German-born residents had been recorded in the County of London, that part of the city excluding the outer suburbs. By 1921, this figure had fallen to 9,083. In 1911, there had been 8,869 Austrian-born people in the same district. By 1921, there were only 1,552. In other words, it had been found fairly easy to arrest, detain, and deport as many foreigners as we felt like doing. Here then is a blueprint which could very easily be followed today if the political will existed to be as firm as we were during the Great War. Obviously, something of the kind undertaken today would need to be on a vastly larger scale than the programme conducted at that time. Instead of tens of thousands of foreigners, we would be dealing with millions. However, just as was done in 1914, it would be a fairly easy matter to commandeer old factories or to set up tented encampments surrounded by barbed wire. If the army proved to have no appetite for such a task, then I rather suspect that a call for volunteer guards would probably find no shortage of citizens ready to play their part. The mechanics of the thing are not complicated, but whether the public as a whole would tolerate the establishment of concentration camps is open to question. Obviously, these days it would not be expedient to call them by their true name, as was done during the First World War. Some soothing alternative would need to be sought. Transit camps, perhaps, or even internment camps. When the British Army began using concentration camps in Northern Ireland a little over 50 years ago, nobody batted an eyelid because they were sold as internment camps. Viewers who advocate strong and determined action both to prevent illegal immigration and also to remove those already living in this country do need to ask themselves, though, how far they would be prepared to go along this road. It would not only be the European Convention on Human Rights which would have to be scrapped, but also that cornerstone of individual liberty, habeas corpus. That need not, of course, be an insurmountable obstacle. We abandoned habeas corpus in Northern Ireland in 1971, and there is no reason at all why we couldn't do so again to tackle this present crisis. The problem is that once you do that, then an awful lot changes, not only for foreigners, but also for the British themselves. Passing an enabling act would be no problem for a strong government with a good working majority, and it could be of such a general nature that clauses could simply be added as and when they were found necessary. Such a state of affairs, though, neatly as it would deal with the problem of illegal immigration, would at a stroke transform this nation from a liberal democracy into something quite different. It may be felt that this is a price worth paying, but it might equally well be that when presented with the programme which I have outlined, some of those watching this video will find themselves shaking their heads and deciding that the cure is worse than the disease. In other words, they might feel that sharing the country with a lot of unwanted foreigners who have taken up residence here without being invited to do so and now have their feet well and truly under the table is the lesser of two evils, and that they would rather endure this situation, no matter how unwelcome, than see the country turned into what might look perilously close to a dictatorship.